Roster predictions, Miami Dolphins fans. How are we feeling today? It is Ben Morgan of the Fins Up Network. Yes, it is finally here. The preseason is in the books. That means final cuts are going down soon. We actually already saw a couple by the time that you are seeing this video today. That's what we are doing today. We are going to try to predict that 53-man roster because cuts are due Tuesday afternoon. Now, for a timeline so that you can know when this video was actually created, I'm recording it Sunday night. My plan is to release it on Monday morning. And like I said, we have seen a couple of cuts already. Mike White was released on Sunday, and so was Jody Fortson. Now, I actually predicted those two being cut when I finalized my roster. I actually went through everything on Saturday night. So quick pat on the back, but hey, I think a lot of people already had those two in the books. But this particular 53-man roster prediction is my stab at what I think Chris Grier and company are actually going to do with this roster on Tuesday, not necessarily what I think they should do. So I just want to throw that out there as well. Dolphins fans, we are going to jump in 1 second. Before we do, I got to hear from you. If you disagree with anything, if you've got guys making the squad that I don't and vice versa, go ahead, let me know in the comments. That's what they are there for. If you haven't gotten subscribed yet, make sure you are doing that as well. One last thing I want to throw out there as well. Fans, I am well aware that my graphics aren't the sharpest thing that you're going to see on the internet. I actually kind of laughed at the nice PowerPoint comment a while back. I don't know if it was serious or sarcastic. Maybe they're fine and I'm overthinking it. Regardless, I like to give at least a visual of what we're talking about. So who you can see, who I have making it, who's cut, maybe who's on IR. So yeah, go ahead. You can judge my PowerPoint. It is a Canva. I mean, I'm at least semi with the times there. So I'm going to throw that on the screen right now, and we will go position by position through this puppy. And like I said, go ahead and drop your thoughts on there because like we already talked about, Mike White is officially off the roster. Now, I will say this. I think Mike White more so lost the backup quarterback job more so than Skylar Thompson won the quarterback job. So yes, as of recording this, Mike White is Tua Tagovailoa's backup. But I will say that thinking that the Miami Dolphins, if the right trade opportunity arises, we already talked a little bit about Dorian Thompson Robinson in the past. If there's another player that maybe gets cut, because I truly think there are some third string quarterbacks that'll get cut that I would have more faith in than Skylar Thompson. Now, I know there's an argument saying, hey, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of timing. There's a lot of routes. There's a lot of everything that goes into this offense. You can't just get some guy off the street. I agree with that. And quite honestly, if something major happens to Tua, we're probably toast anyways. And I know that Skylar's been in this system, but at the same time, I say that knowing there's probably some guys I still have more faith in. And quite honestly, Skylar's got a big arm. He makes flash plays here and there, but at the end of the day, that inability to read the field and the opportunities that he has for just being prone to turnovers makes me think that if the right guy becomes available, the Miami Dolphins might just go ahead and make a move there at quarterback. So like I said, we won't go into any more details on the quarterback. Skylar Thompson is your quarterback too as of now. Just keep an eye on who may get cut here over the next few days. All right, let's jump in the running backs. Like I said, I'm not going to go into details on every single player on this roster. I'm going to talk more about the players that kind of stand out here. And as you see, I put Alec Ingold on the list as well. So obviously I'm including running backs and fullbacks here. This one comes down the top three, Mostert, Achane, Wright. Those are your shoe-ins. I absolutely love that trio at running back. Where it got tough for me was Wilson versus Chris Brooks. Now, I went with Wilson. One, because he's proven to be a little bit healthier, even though he's had his run with injuries over the last couple of years. But he went into this offseason like a man possessed. Once they drafted Jaylen Wright, he knew his job was on the line. He ended up stepping up. He made some plays through OTAs, minicamp, training camp. And not that Chris Brooks didn't. I swear, every time Chris Brooks gets into a game, the guy's making an impact play. Here's the problem, though. He's always seemingly not trying. He's just seemingly getting hurt. And that's one thing that you can't necessarily hold against him. But at the end of the day, this is the cliche. What the best ability is availability. And unfortunately, Chris Brooks just hasn't been that. And now with the plethora of running backs that there are around the league, I think that there's an opportunity that the Dolphins wanted to keep Chris Brooks around. You can probably find a spot for this guy on the practice squad. So I wouldn't be upset if you ended up going Chris Brooks over Jeff Wilson. I'm just going to let the experience play the kind of get the trump in this one over a guy like Chris Brooks. As we move on to the wide receivers. So the other thing that you're going to notice when it comes to wide receivers and edge players. So I'm putting all the guys on IR that are technically already going to be on IR that are going to miss the season. But the NFL has now also given the teams basically 2 guys that they can put on IR here as they make these roster cuts. So you can essentially keep 55 guys as long as 2 of those guys are going on IR right away. That IR meaning that they're going to miss at least the first 4 games. So I have put Odell Beckham Jr. on that IR list. So that's why you're going to see him on IR there. As of Sunday night, he's not technically on IR, but I wanted to at least make that kind of clear as to what I'm saying. But because that happens, it really opens the door and keeps guys around your Braxton Berrios, your Erik Ezukanma. That's Braxton Berrios is a guy that I would have said, you know what? The Miami Dolphins may either try to trade this guy or cut this guy if Odell Beckham would have stayed healthy, if Tahj Washington would have stayed healthy. But here we are today thinking that we have this super deep wide receiver unit. Well, kind of right now outside of Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, it might not be all that deep. So you might go against River Cracraft. We already talked about him. He's going to miss some time as well. So look for this to be a position where you got River Cracraft that's kind of dinged up. Braxton Berrios hasn't been knocking anyone's socks off. Malik Washington has been fine, but most of his plays have been coming more so in the kick and punt return game. Plus, he's a rookie. How much faith, trust you're going to put into him? And then Erik Ezukanma was in a walking boot just like 48, 72 hours ago. So at this point in time, look for the Miami Dolphins to potentially add a wide receiver or 2 to that practice squad. So the first couple of weeks of the season, they can bring that guy up. And maybe it's more of a veteran guy that they don't mind bringing into the game and needing to get some reps out of right away. But also keep in mind what we talked about, I think about a week or 2 ago. The Dolphins, they weren't going to be shocked by this. They knew the status of their roster, but they believe in Jonnu Smythe being able to pick up some of that weight. They believe in being able to move a guy like Devon Achane out wide and use him as a wide receiver as well. So Mike McDaniel has a plan. I don't think it's as doom as gloom as it looks when we consider all of these injuries. But at the end of the day, you can make a case for keeping Berrios off. You can make a case for keeping Ezukanma on. And I'm not 100% sure if they'll end up keeping 6 the way it is as well. Just like I said, how things are playing out with the injuries that they've accumulated over the last few weeks, this is how I see the team playing it out at wide receiver. All right, we talked a little bit about the tight ends right there already, and obviously Jody Fortson was cut on Sunday. That one was announced on Sunday. This one, I feel very confident with Jonnu Smythe, Durham Smythe, Julian Hill. I think they've kind of separated themselves from the pack. And then you've got Tanner Conner, who was coming on. Remember that preseason game right before he got hurt? He was one of the better looking playmakers that we had on offense going for us that day. Then you got a little bit of noise coming up here from Hayden Rucci as a guy that can move people with his blocks. He caught the 20-yard touchdown a couple of days ago from Skylar Thompson in the preseason game. He made a couple other nice catches. He led the team in receptions and yards in that last preseason game. But at the end of the day, Hayden Rucci screams, you know what? If we want to keep this guy, we can keep him on the practice squad. And I kind of give a little bit of a leg up to Tanner Conner because, quite honestly, I think you could probably stash him on your practice squad as well. I don't know if there's going to be a team out there that outright sees him and says, yep, that's a guy that we definitely need on our 53-man roster. So if the Dolphins ended up only keeping Jonnu Smythe, Durham Smythe, Julian Hill, I wouldn't be outright shocked. I just think we've invested so much time, effort, resources into Tanner Conner that if he proves to end up being healthy enough, there's a guy that could potentially carve out a little bit of a role, especially if a guy like Jonnu Smythe were to end up getting hurt, because right now Jonnu Smythe is our clear-cut pass-catching tight end, and he kind of becomes the only one that you're going to trust in that role between him, Smythe, and Hill, because you already cut Jody Fortson. So that's why I kept Tanner Conner on for the time being. But like I said, wouldn't be surprised if they kept 3. Wouldn't be surprised if Tanner Conner ends up being that practice squad guy as well. Offensive line is interesting to me, but at the same time, it's not. And I feel very underwhelmed saying that. But quite honestly, it's like you almost have to keep the guys that you're keeping, and the guys that you're cutting. Who's interested in those guys right now? Hayes was what, a 7th round pick. Hines was a guy that was basically on the practice squad last year. The other 3 guys are essentially undrafted free agents. So it's not like they were really on anyone's radar to begin with. And it's not like they did anything this offseason that's going to say, yep, that's another guy that we need on our 53-man roster. I don't feel that way about any of those guys in the cut list. And quite honestly, it's a little bit of an underrated injury. But Sean Harlow, not that he was a guy that you want starting on your offensive line, but he was turning a little bit of a corner, it seemed like, and was at least a guy that you could throw into that guard center mix. Because as of right now, when you look at our roster, there's still question marks. And it's not just question marks about who's filling out the roster. It's question marks about who's starting. You guys see Isaiah Wynn on a milk carton? Basically, the way I've been told is Isaiah Wynn, when he got hurt last year, he kind of went missing in action. He did a lot of rehab on his own, and that didn't sit well with the team. The team liked how he performed when he was out there, so they gave him another try this year. Well, guess what? Kind of seems like he's doing the same thing again this year, and the team is not thrilled about that. So based on the information I've been given, there's been some talk potentially of an injury settlement, but at the same time, when he does get right, the team realizes, man, this guy can contribute. We probably would need him as a starter. The other guys on there, I mean, essentially, who are you going to cut? You could, Driscoll kind of got work the last preseason game. Lester Cotton doesn't, I mean, I don't mind him in some short area running stuff. He can move people. I get that. But at the end of the day, he's not the guy that's climbing to the second level with consistency. He's not the guy that you want necessarily starting. Probably more of a depth piece at best. Robert Jones, as of right now, you could predict him potentially to be on the starting 5 as well. So you look at that 24 roster and say, well, yeah, who the hell are we cutting? We kind of need all these guys. So like I said, it's a very underwhelming group right now. And it's sad to say that because we go into this offseason thinking, man, we're going to re-sign Tua. We just re-up Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle. Let's build a wall in front of Tua. Let's give him a little bit more time to create. And I would argue that last year's offensive line going into week 1, probably better than what we're doing going into 2024. And that remains my biggest concern about this Miami Dolphins team. All right, let's do a quick drink break. Jump into the defensive side of the ball. I have a broken record on this. The defensive line and the secondary is what's going to keep Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel, the coaching staff, the front office, awake at night over these next couple of days. And I made the analogy in my last video that just throw all these guys' names in a hat that aren't named Zach Sealer, Calais Campbell, and just pick them however many spots you want to end up doing. On the cut list, I'll admittedly say that Leonard Payne is probably a tier behind those guys, but that's a guy that the team is probably interested in at least maybe practice squad type of worthy. The other 3 on that list, Isaiah Mack, I can make a case for. That guy was showing out at times during these preseason games. Jonathan Harris, every single training camp report seemed like he was tagging up with somebody on a sack. Neville Gallimore, I don't remember the exact figure, but I'm pretty sure he's due a decent amount of guaranteed money. So I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it as well. But at least the last I heard, Benito Jones, I don't want to say they're shoo-ins, but they felt fairly safe. Benito Jones did, Deshaun Hand did, and then Brandon Peely, I know he's had his run with injuries as well, but that's a young guy that's flashed when he's had opportunities and when he's been able to stay healthy. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to stay healthy in that final preseason game. Regardless, I have him making this, but at the same time, like, what I got him keeping 5 right there. Could you add one? Could you take one away? Like I said, this is going to keep Chris Grier up at night. This is one of the positions that I have my eye on, probably as close as any. This and the secondary. Definitely let me know your thoughts on this position in the comments. All right, edge rushers. I talked about that second IR spot. That's where I'm giving to Bradley Chubb. Give him those times. I think he's going to miss the first 4 weeks regardless. get him on IR, open up that roster spot. So that means the surprise likely of this group you're going to see in that cut list is Quentin Bell, because a couple of weeks ago, Quentin Bell was not only making this roster, but he was likely in line to start. You didn't have Jaylen Phillips back yet at this point in time. You still got Chop Robinson and Mo Kamara, who are rookies. Are you going to trust them as your every down edge setting edge rushers? That is a tall ask as well. But the thing is, like, what have you heard? What have you seen from Quentin Bell recently? I mean, we kind of got him for a reason. The production hasn't been there on a consistent basis, and he's popped around to a lot of teams. He's already like, I don't remember his exact age, but I want to say he's like between like that 25 and 28. So he's not that super young guy that you want to continue to invest in as well. So yeah, maybe unfortunately, that just becomes like a cool camp story. It was like, man, Quentin Bell, we found a gem. Well, then what did he do when the lights turned on? And quite honestly, I don't think he had a memorable play from any of the preseason action, which makes your 2024 roster a bit thin. A bit thin, which was unfortunate because when we had the full bodies and Quentin Bell was showing out and Grayson Murphy wasn't already on season-ending IR, it was like, yeah, we're gonna be all right here, especially when Jaylen Phillips came back, especially when Bradley Chubb is able to come back. Well, now we're not quite on there. So this kind of feels like one of those positions where, let's say maybe it does play out how I have it on the screen right there. Maybe this is a position where the Dolphins look at poaching somebody and bringing them onto the roster, or bringing a couple of guys onto the practice squad that they can activate on game day. Because right now you got Phillips and Ogba who have been there and done that. But at the same time, we all love Jaylen Phillips. The dude was hurt on Black Friday. I know he's cleared. I know he's set. He's ready to roll basically for week one. I still have my hesitations. I'd still wish that they would kind of ease his way back in, which leaves you with the two rookies. So keep an eye on that. But like I said, Quentin Bell, man, that's another name that I'm really curious to see how that plays out for him here in the next couple of days. So with that, I originally did not have Curtis Bolton making this roster. The more I see of him, though, the more that I hear, Anthony Weaver likes this guy. Anthony Weaver wants this guy to the point where if maybe they only end up keeping 4 linebackers, you could replace Channing Tindall with Curtis Bolton. And I know Channing Tindall, he had the 12 tackles on what was that now, Friday night? Look at where Channing Tindall is making his tackles. They're all like 6-7 yards down the field. And I get it. You need to make the tackle. But at the end of the day, I talked about how many near tackles he has at or very close to the line of scrimmage, and he doesn't pop. He's not getting them on a consistent basis. He's getting the production as a blitzer, but is that because he's that much better at it, or is that because we're scheming that up and someone else can do that? So I'm really curious to see how things play out with Channing Tindall, how things play out with Curtis Bolton. This team has kept Duke Riley around longer than I would have. So he's like, I don't want to call him a cockroach. That's not nice. But at the same time, he's that dude that you can't get rid of. He just keeps coming back. Is there an allegiance to him? Could he get factored into this as well? Anthony Walker pops right away when all of the offseason work starts happening. Where's he been? He's got some injury stuff working against him as well. Linebackers is kind of that underrated, sneaky position that I'm keeping that extra eye on, because how does it play out with Tindall, Bolton, Riley? Like I said, I'm going to keep it like this for the time being, but this is probably one of those positions where I feel like maybe I'm missing something. Maybe something gets away from me here. We will find out soon. All right, cornerbacks. This is the other one where I don't want to say it's shocking, but this is one of the places where I've got the cheaper, undrafted, free agent guy that you want to potentially invest in, making the roster over older vet who's been there, done that, but at the same time is 2 years removed from a pretty major surgery and hasn't necessarily bounced back maybe the way we would thought, maybe the way that the team would thought. And there I'm talking about Storm Duck and Nick Needham. That was probably one of the last changes that I ended up making to this roster, but I just think at some point in time you end up giving that young guy the shot, and then maybe that ends up costing you one of the veterans, one of the guys that you get a little bit of a cost savings on. In this situation, it's Nick Needham. But the other name I want to keep an eye on here is Isaiah Johnson. And I will be fairly surprised if he makes this initial 53-man roster, but this is a guy that I'm kind of, I'll say vouching for, even though I don't get a vote in this situation. I'd love to see this guy stick on the practice squad. And it's not necessarily that I think that he gets called up for actual in-game situations this year. I think we would need some injuries, obviously, in order for that to happen. But at the end of the day, I think that's the body type, that's the athlete, that's some of the production that we've seen that you would really like to continue to invest in as well. I actually like what I saw at spurts from Jason Maitre as well. Keep an eye on him for potentially the practice squad as well. But I feel pretty good with the Ramsey, Fuller, Kohu, Smythe, Bonner, Saran, Neal. Not only can he play obviously in your secondary, but he's going to end up being one of your core special teamers as well. I feel like he's pretty safe. So the biggest probably surprise from this group would be putting Storm Duck over Nick Needham. All right, we'll round things out with the safeties just so I don't forget. The final three guys on this roster are your special teamers. So obviously you've got Jake Bigley at punter. You got Blake Ferguson at long snapper. And then I was I almost called him our last kicker, but Jason Sanders obviously at place kicker as well. But yes, let's keep an eye on the safeties here as well, because one of the things you'll notice here is that we are cutting one of our draft selections from the 2024 NFL draft. Now, this is another one that I didn't necessarily want to do, but at the same time, it's like, okay, you're not cutting Holland, you're not cutting Poyer. At least I don't think so, especially Holland. Regardless, I think Elijah Campbell provides too much in regards to versatility. He can play defensive back, he can play your cornerback, he can play safety, he does stuff on special teams. I feel good about him. Marcus May versus Patrick McMorris. It kind of comes down to, yeah, you'd get a little bit of cost savings by keeping McMorris, but think about Marcus May. A little bit of an under the radar signing, just kind of flew in there. Didn't get a ton of run here this offseason, but one of those guys that has started every single NFL game that he has appeared in, versus Patrick McMorris, who was kind of a surprise 6th round pick. I didn't really see him on a ton of draft boards to begin with. So if you want to continue to invest in him, that might be a guy that you can also stash on your practice squad versus a guy like Marcus May. Maybe you keep him up on your roster. Maybe that's a guy that would end up signing somewhere else if you ended up outright releasing him. So I'm going to go with those four. Unfortunately, a guy like Mark Perry, he just couldn't quite put it together here this offseason. That's kind of one of those guys that I probably had, I would say probably the most promise for, the most hope for as an undrafted free agent. It just didn't quite click. I know he made a nice little play in the last, I think it was the joint practice or one of our final practices when he had a pick six. Regardless, I don't think it wasn't enough. It wasn't consistent enough at the very least. So I had him being released as well. Dolphins fans, I went long today. I apologize for that. Hopefully you found it all intriguing and good content to be able to spend a little bit of your time with. But like I said, any changes you had, any strong agreements, strong disagreements, go ahead and drop them in the comments. Once the initial 53-man roster is announced, we will be back with a video as well, breaking all of that down and all that good stuff as well. Stay tuned. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that one live or not. That's something I'm kind of toying around with. It all depends on a few different things. Internet, family, kids, all the other schedules that we have to juggle at this stage in our lives. I've rambled on enough, Dolphins fans. Until the next time, fins up.